To briefly introduce Women++, for those of you that haven't heard about us in the past, and also share some information about Deploy Impact, our newest initiative. Women++ is a Swiss nonprofit organization with the mission to increase diversity in the Swiss tech industry. Our core values of leadership, education, inclusion, and collaboration guide the design of every Women++ initiative. We have around 80% female participation ratio in our programs, which is achieved by implementing women-friendly tech programs designed to attract women to the tech industry, support their transition into tech, and to facilitate female leadership in the tech sector. So building on Women's++ learnings from previous events, Deploy Impact is designed to maximize impact by focusing on applied learning, collaboration, and connecting the community with companies that support diversity in tech. So the format is a remote, hands-on software development program for social good. Who takes part in Deploy Impact? The protagonists are NGOs, participants, and mentors. More than ever, NGOs are in need of tech solutions to advance their missions. They bring real challenges for participants, challenges that can help directly advance their social cause. There will be around 30 participants with different backgrounds who will be key to building successful solutions to advance social good. So if you are looking for a collaborative hands-on tech project experience tailored for learning, then this is the program for you. Sponsoring companies will bring their knowledge, their know-how to help project teams develop extraordinary solutions while honing their skills. They will facilitate preparatory workshops and offer mentorship support during the program. This year, with Deploy Impact, you can make a difference. Develop software solutions for one of these two social causes, either with InZone project powered by University of Geneva. You will develop software that enables students in refugee camps to access world-class education. Or with Kona Connect project, you can help marginalized communities access legal aid worldwide. In this program, you will work with a dynamic, interdisciplinary team for a duration of 6 weeks, from October 16th till November 27th. And participants will collaborate in a digital platform remotely and investing around 10 dedicated hours per week with flexible schedules. Women++ is looking for a healthy mix of tech and domain expertise to each team, including tech project managers, software developers, UX, UI designers, and AI specialists. Finally, what are the benefits of taking part in Deploy Impact? You'll get to make a difference. Develop software solutions which can be implemented in nonprofits with global reach and demonstrable social impact. You'll get the hands-on experience. You'll learn how to develop a product from A to Z, from business requirements, definition to proof of concept, together with product owners. And you'll receive mentorship and work opportunities. You can take your profile to the next level with direct mentorship and educational workshops from tech teams of world-renowned companies throughout our program. You can create connections with other tech professionals and maybe find your next dream job. You'll meet and learn and share with like-minded colleagues and institutions. You can expand your network and leverage your freshly sharpened skills with abundant opportunities to meet fellow bright minds with common goals. And last but not least, you can win a prize. The most successful solution for each tech project will win a prize. Now, I would like to introduce to you Julia Stüb, who will be facilitating today's workshop. Julia is a technology consultant at Accenture with a strong focus on Agile software delivery. As an Agile native, she helps development teams to excel in the world of Agile, no matter where they are on their Agile journey, both in scaled and non-scaled environments. Julia truly believes in the benefits of Agile and has helped various teams to unleash its power by applying it correctly. And apart from her daily business, she is passionate about inclusion and diversity and supports various initiatives around LGBTIQ+ and gender. On that note, Julia, thank you for joining us today. Please feel free to get started.
All right. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here, very happy to see a lot of faces. I will take over the sharing if that is fine for you, Eva.
Of course, thanks.
Okay. So guys, this is going to be the platform that we will be using during this session. And first of all, I ask you, if you are currently in Mural yourself, please go down to the bottom, search your initials or your picture, and click on your name. And then please broadcast your cursor, broadcast my cursor. Because otherwise, when you're moving around on the board, you might shift some content, which is a little bit distracting for me if you're shifting around the content. So if you could just broadcast your cursor, then everything is fine. Okay, so I hope that everyone has received the email to join the Mural board. Otherwise, if it's not working right now, or if you're still setting it up, this is fine. You can also just look at my board and you will see exactly the same. But if you want to move around a little bit and maybe already have a sneak peek at some of the other content, then you can join the Mural board yourself. So I'm not sure if you have ever worked with Mural. It's actually quite a cool tool because it allows you to have interactive sessions where people can work together, brainstorm together in visual and virtual setups. So now how this works. So actually this is the entire presentation or the entire content that we will discuss today. It looks like nothing, but then if you zoom in, this is where the magic happens, because this is where all the content then appears. So let me start with a little introduction of myself, although Eva, I think you have mentioned the most important things already. So my name is Julia. I work for Accenture Solutions IQ. We are the experts for Agile software delivery, Agile advisory, and Agile coaching. So whenever clients want to transform from more traditional software development approaches to an Agile approach, or whenever they want to scale from a team approach to a platform approach, or whenever they need supporting Agile coaching, they would come to us, and then we will send our experts to the client. So before we dig into the topic, I just want to give you some general information on how this is going to work today. So as you see, these are the tools that we will be using today. Mainly it's Mural and then Google Hangouts, which will allow us to move into smaller breakout sessions at some point today. And we will also use Mentimeter. I'm going to show you what this tool is about just in 1 or 2 minutes. Then there is some working agreements that I usually like to mention when I'm having online sessions, because it just helps and makes everything more interactive. So as you already did, turn on your camera, especially when you speak. It just makes it more lively and interactive. As I said, this is an interactive session. That means that you are allowed to jump in all time. So if you have questions, just interrupt me, let me know. But you can also add more general questions, which you don't want to ask during the session, or maybe you even want to stay anonymous. Then you can add them to our parking lot, which is here on the site. You can add a question here, and then we will go through the questions at the end of our session. So here you can see the agenda. This is actually a Kanban board. I don't know if you are familiar with Kanban. This is one of the Agile frameworks where you work with a visual board to display your process of work. It's actually nice to design or to visualize your agenda in a similar way. So first of all, today, this session is about distributed Agile, which means people which are not located in one physical location, but rather spread over several locations. This is going to be the main focus. But what I want to do first, I want to give you a quick introduction into Agile, because I don't know how much experience you have already with Agile, whether you know what it is, maybe you have even worked with it, or it could also be that you are a totally new to this topic. So I want to give you a sneak peek of what it actually is before we go into the topic. So that will be the first point. Then we will talk about the shift towards remote. So why is this happening? When did it start? What are the reasons? Afterwards, we are going to discuss what are challenges and opportunities for remote Agile teams. And last but not least, we are going to discuss how you can build and organize remote teams so that they are successful. I have also prepared a very short exercise for you. So that means that you can get into your breakout rooms, meet some fellow colleagues, and then work on a very little case together for about 15 minutes. And then in the end, we have a quick wrap up and then a Q&A session. If there are any questions from your end regarding Agile, distributed teams, maybe you have questions about Accenture or any other topics, happy to discuss. So I hope you feel a little bit more comfortable by now with Mural. So I would say let's just get started. Mentimeter is another tool that we are using today because it will allow us to make interactive surveys. Go to menti.com and then please enter this code that you see here on the top. And the first question is about what do you know about Agile? And here I just want to understand from your end whether you have maybe never heard of the term, so it's completely new to you. Maybe you have heard of it, but you don't really know what it is. The other option is you kind of know what it is. The other option would be you do have some practical experience with Agile already, so you actually have quite a good idea of what it is. And then the other option is I'm an Agile expert, both in theory and practice. And then the last option is I am currently working in an Agile role. You can choose more than one answer. So if you're working in an Agile role, you can also choose your level of experience. So it seems that we have one Agile expert in the call. Very interesting. Curious to know who that is. Otherwise, most of the people, you do have some practical experience with Agile. That's cool, which means that you know it from theory and you would also know it from practice, maybe because you have worked with it at university or at some kind of organization. Would say most of you guys, you do have little to medium experience with Agile. Okay. Good. Then I have a second question prepared. So I'm going to move forward to the second question. And you should be seeing it now on your phone or on your browser. And here I want to know which of the Agile frameworks you know. We have Scrum, we have Kanban, Extreme Programming, Less, Safe, and DAD. So the first three ones, Scrum, Kanban, and Extreme Programming, these are used when we talk about one team working together. And then the other ones are the frameworks which we would use in a bigger setup. So where we have different Agile teams which work together towards one solution. Okay, interesting. So I think Scrum is definitely the most famous one. Most of the people have heard about Scrum already. Okay, Kanban is also very widely known. And also Safe, yeah. I think people who know Scrum usually also know about Safe, or the opposite way around, actually. When you know about Safe, you know about Scrum, because it's actually building on top. So good, then now let's get started and deep dive into the first topic, which is the world around Agile. So we are going to talk about the basics because I want to make sure that you actually understand what we are going to talk about. As you can see, I incorporated some funny pictures because it's always nice to have some distractions and not just very boring and consulting and managing slides, because you usually don't remember them anyway. I like this comic very much because if you read through it, it's actually highlighting some of the benefits that we have with Agile, or some of the challenges that come with Agile as well. But when you read the last picture, you actually understand that this person has absolutely no clue about Agile, but rather it's maybe more of a buzzword or a trend, and he thinks, okay, cool, everyone is doing it, so we have to do it as well. So this just as a side note. But let's dig deeper into the first topic, what is Agile? So Agile is actually an umbrella term for different kind of, sorry guys, don't move it, for different kinds of methods, frameworks, and methods, which are always human-centered. So this is something that they have in common. It's a project management and delivery approach which puts human people into the center. But Agile, it's not just a project management and delivery approach. It's also a mindset, a way of thinking, how people can address complex problems and find solutions by being innovative, by being flexible, by being able to respond to change quickly. And one very important aspect of Agile is that we are having an iterative and incremental approach. That means we do not define one start point and one end point, but rather we work in different increments and several iterations until we find the perfect solution. And on this journey, we always have very close contact to the end user or to the client, and we have very frequent inspection and adaptation workshops. That means we want to be very, very close to the end user to understand their needs and to incorporate their different needs as fast as possible. And here in the bottom, you can see Agile is really not just about people or tools or processes. Rather, it combines everything, and it really stretches all over the different functions and dimensions that we have within an organization, and also within a project team. And here again, some of the buzzwords that are usually connected to Agile, it's customer-centric, meaning we are putting the customer into our focus. It is a different mindset, so people need to think differently. Speed is also very commonly correlated with Agile, although you need to be a little bit careful, because it does not mean that you're going to reach a goal or an end product faster with Agile, but rather you are getting real customer feedback earlier in the process. So you are actually delivering something into the market earlier in the process, and you are getting real feedback, which you then can incorporate. And react to change, yes, because we are not planning everything upfront. We stay flexible, we allow change. Okay, then what we usually do when we talk about Agile, we try to compare it to more traditional ways of project management methods. And Agile is very, very common in the area of software development, but it's not limited to software development. We see that many other practices and competences start using Agile methods, or at least some elements of it as well. But it all started within software engineering, and this is where it is mostly used and very common. So when we look at more traditional approaches of developing software, we have the waterfall approach, which is actually an approach which works in silos. That means that whenever we decide that we want to build a new solution, we start with defining the solution. Okay, what are the requirements and what do we need? This may take 1 to 2 years, depending on how big the software is. Maybe it's a smaller software, then it takes just a few months. But you define exactly what you want to build and what the requirements are. When you are done, you shift over. So you now know what you want to do. Now you're going to design it. When this is done, you again shift over. You are going to build. And then again, when you have built the solution, you're going to test it. What you can see here clearly, we do this in silos, meaning that we don't work in iterations. We don't have different increments, but rather we only go to the next step if the previous step is finished. And this is where the difference comes to Agile, because we don't do this in Agile. We don't define our endpoint. Rather, we start with our development early, meaning that we define, design, build, and test all at once in a given period of time, in a given increment, and we do this in iteration until we reach our target solution. So instead of working in silos, we do everything at the same time, but we do it multiple times until we reach what we actually want. And here is another very famous, or one of my favorite pictures. It's a little bit over dramatized, and it's just for illustration purposes. But when we look at the waterfall method, we see that we gather a lot of requirements, and then in the end, what we actually deliver to the client is it's not really what they expected, or it's not really functioning. On the other hand, with Agile, we start with gathering a small amount of requirements, then we build it, we test it, we implement it, and then we invite our customer to see, hey, look, this is what we built. Do you like it? Is this what you want? And they say yes or no. If they say no, then we can implement the changes already so we can improve to the next iteration. In sprint 2, for example, we have already improved and enhanced our solution. And we do this all along the way until we reach our target or final solution, or the solution which is very, very close to the real customer requirements. Okay. So, Louisa, if there's any questions in the chat, then please just interrupt me. Otherwise, I'll just go on. Cool. Then let's have a quick look at Scrum. I think I'm going to do this very, very high level because I saw that most of you already are familiar with Scrum. So Scrum is a framework, an Agile framework, which allows teams and people to address complex problems and then finding solutions which have the highest possible value. And as I said before, Agile methodologies, and especially Scrum, are very frequently used in software development teams. It actually has its origins there already back in the 1990s. But in other words, it's just a set of principles and lessons which you can apply to teamwork. For example, it's actually a collection of different kind of meetings, tools, and roles that we find within a team, how they can reach the highest possible value for a client. And in the Scrum team, we have 3 basic roles which are very important. We have a product owner. So the product owner is the person who is in constant communication with the business stakeholders, because the business stakeholders, these are actually our clients. They have some kind of problem, they have some kind of need that we want to solve with our development. And the product owner is this person who is always in close contact. He or she is accountable for maximizing the value of the product by defining, managing, and prioritizing a product backlog. So the product backlog is actually the requirements defined by the business translated into more technical terms. Usually we would call it features, epics, or user stories. In the end, the product owner is really responsible for the product and for defining the vision together with the business. And then a very prominent role is the Scrum Master, which is a servant leader. So this person is actually the guy who knows everything about the Scrum methodology and helps the development team to stick to the rules. He or she is the champion of Agile practices, of Agile ceremonies, And it's really coaching both product owner and development team how they are going to make use of Scrum most effectively. And then probably one of the most important parts of the Scrum team are the developers. So the development team, which are the person who in the end are going to implement the product backlog. So these are requirements engineers who write technical specifications. These are software developers who in the end write every line of code. And we also would find software testers. So these guys who then verify that what the coders have developed is actually correspondent to the requirements. So these are the main roles that you need to know. And then maybe very, very quickly how a usual Scrum process would look like. Maybe you have heard of the term sprint, very famous. In Scrum, we work with sprint, which is a given time period, usually 2 to 4 weeks, depending how big the team is. And at the beginning of each sprint, we look at the product backlog together with the product owner. So the product owner comes into the meeting, tells us, hey, see these and these requirements we need to develop. And he or she is actually prioritizing them. And then the development team comes and sees, okay, so these are the requirements. We have this amount of capacity. What can we do? And then together with the product owner, you plan what you're going to build in the next 2 to 4 weeks together. And this is called the sprint planning. So here, all the guys come together and they plan what they want to deliver. And then we start the sprint, which is usually 2 to 4 weeks. In this period of time, the development team is actually sitting there, coding, testing, defining. So this is where the magic happens. And here we have the Scrum Master who makes sure that everyone is happy and everybody can work without any impediments. And then after the sprint, we would have a sprint review where we come again together. We see, okay, what did we deliver? Is everything fine? Is everything according to the requirements defined by the business? If not, the requirement actually goes back into the product backlog and we would send it into the sprint again. But hopefully everything is fine and we would be able to release a certain component of the software already. Another ceremony is the sprint retrospective. This is just for the development team with the Scrum Master, where you discuss the last sprint. You discuss, okay, what went well, where can we improve, how did we feel, stuff like this. Because one very important aspect of Scrum and in general Agile is continuous improvement. We want to learn from every iteration that we have so that we can improve our processes every time in each iteration. Yeah, so this is basically how the Scrum framework looks like. But as I mentioned, Scrum is just one framework. So Scrum is not equal Agile and Agile is not equal Scrum. Important to understand. Rather, we have so many other frameworks. As I said in the introduction, we have light-weighted approaches, which are usually for one team. And then we have the fuller approaches or the scaled approaches, which are for more than one teams. So you can see Scrum, Kanban, and then very common in the scaled Agile setup is SAFe or less. I hope this helped you. As a very short introduction into Agile. Obviously, there's so much more that we could cover, so much more that we could discuss, but I think this is enough for right now. I hope that you have a little overview of what Agile actually is. Because the main topic of today is the shift towards remote and what is different. Again, what you can see here is another comic. Maybe afterwards you can go to the mural board again and have a look through. So let's have a look first on what theory is telling us. Because when you look into Agile theory, when you read through the Scrum Guide or when you read through the Agile manifestos or many articles about Agile, very often they would tell you it only works if people are co-located. That means that all of the team members need to be in the same location, in the same physical location, let's say in the same office building or even closely located, like you see here on the same table. Because Agile, and especially the framework Scrum, which we just discussed, requires a lot of interaction between people. Everybody needs to be aligned and people need to talk to each other. Because remember, we are not working in silos. Rather, we do all of the different steps in a software delivery process at the same time. And if this is going to function, you need to talk to everyone. Meaning, if I'm a tester, I need to talk to the coder. If I'm a coder, I need to talk to requirements engineer and stuff like this. And theory tells us that this is only possible if you are at the same physical location, because this will allow you to collaborate and interact face to face, and you can have your agile ceremonies conducted in person, meaning you have all of these meetings like the sprint planning, the sprint review, etc., in the same location, for example, in one big room. However, this is just one part of the coin, because now we need to look at the reality and how it actually looks like. So the other extreme of co-located teams are distributed teams. The definition is simple. As soon as one member is not located in the same physical location as the rest of the team, then we are talking about a distributed agile team. And very often, and especially now after we had this times with the pandemic, people are located all over the world or at different places, especially also in home office. People are suddenly no longer located at the same physical location. Even if it's the same city, you are not sitting in the same room. Hence, you are having the same challenges as a team, which might be distributed over the entire world. What comes with it, obviously, you have limited or no face-to-face interaction, and you cannot have your agile ceremonies in person. Rather, you have them virtually or partially virtually. It always depends on how many people are actually located somewhere else. There are setups where maybe 50% of the team is located, let's say, in Zurich. Then they can still meet in person, but the rest of the team would be virtually. And then let's have a look into why we see this change. Of course, there are several motivations for this. First of all, let's talk a little bit about software architecture, which is actually changing all the time. We are having more modern tech stacks, more modern solutions on a very, very rapid scale, meaning that we nowadays have software architecture which allows for modular designs. And this is very important because that means that actually we can deliver software end to end from different locations, meaning that we are not dependent on having all of the roles in one location in order for deploying software. Then another motivation is that we want to get the best talents we can. Sometimes this is not possible in one given physical location, because sometimes skilled personnel is hard to find, and sometimes we need niche skills which are very, very difficult to find. For example, in one of my previous projects, we were developing a tool with ETL Informatica. And this is a niche that you cannot, it's a niche skill, you cannot find it in Switzerland. So we were forced to find people nearshore and offshore so that we were able to deliver. And this is very, very, very common, that you actually find the best talent and skills all over the world and not just in one given physical location. Another motivation can be, of course, that we want to have diverse teams. We want to have globally diverse teams because many studies have shown that having diversity in teams is beneficial. It helps to share knowledge and it helps to increase productivity. Another motivation, of course, is cost optimization, because as soon as we move nearshore or maybe even offshore, the costs are decreasing. So sometimes this also might be a motivation for organizations to have remote agile teams. And then another motivation would be that we can offer a support model if we go to the extreme, 24/7, meaning if we have people working in one time zone and people working in another time zone, they can just like hand over their stuff when, for example, India is going to bed, then the Swiss team starts, they hand over, and vice versa, meaning that we would have a support model which is higher than having only, for example, Swiss people working, where we start working from 8 to 5. But now let's have a look at the challenges and opportunities that come with remote agile teams. Let's start with the challenges. Some of them I think I have already mentioned, and some of them are also very obvious, so we don't need to spend too much time here. First of all, one challenge, you don't have as much personal interaction as you would have in co-located teams, meaning you're not there to have lunches together. There's no coffee talks, no chit chat. And sometimes these things are very, very important. It's these small things, this informal stuff, which makes teams work better. And it's difficult to have this when you are always virtual, but it's not impossible. One challenge, of course, time zone mismatches. My favorite example, India and Zurich, because that's what I'm currently working in with my team. Our Indian team starts way earlier than we do in Switzerland, meaning that we have less time where we actually both work. So we need to plan our time very wisely so that we can make use of the time that we are both online. Technology dependency, of course, you know it. You need to have a stable network. You need to have a video conference tool. You need to have a virtual project management tool. And everything is nice to have, but if your internet is not stable, you will not be able to work. And it's very, very difficult also to communicate, which then obviously this can lead to productivity issues. One thing that we see very often is the missing business context, meaning that people working from around find it very difficult to understand the bigger picture or to relate to what is going on site. The business context is usually defined on site. So let's say this is in Switzerland. And then for people who are sitting, let's say near shore or offshore, it's difficult to relate to that because it's just so far away. And this also then comes with lack of trust. I think if you don't know the people personally, if you have never met them in person, it takes more time to develop some sense of trust. Again, it's not impossible, but I think you need to make more effort to gain the trust of your colleagues. And then, of course, cultural differences is always a topic in diverse teams. And another challenge is the lack of team spirit, because when you are co-located, you see your teammates every day. You talk about personal stuff, you have coffee, maybe you even have a beer after work. But this is so difficult when you are remote. But exactly those those informal, interhuman things are the motivators or the drivers for a good team spirit. But again, all of these are challenges, but there's always a way to overcome this. So, but let's have a look at the opportunities, because obviously there must be opportunities because so many organizations are now building remote agile teams. First of all, they want to get the best talent. So they don't want to be limited to Swiss talents, but rather they want to have talents from all over the world and find the guys who are really the best ones. Also, talent retention is often said to be easier with distributed teams. This comes hand in hand with work-life balance because people feel more empowered, feel more satisfied if they can work from their home location rather than traveling far away on a daily basis or on a weekly basis or maybe for longer assignments. So we would say that distributed teams are actually more employee-centric, meaning that we put the needs of our employees into the very center and we adapt around to this. Opportunities, yes, you can build very diverse teams, meaning different skills, different background, education, and so on. Every dimensions of diversity you can take into consideration. Increase productivity, yes, depending on how good you work with your team. If you have good processes in place, if your communication is good, we would see that the productivity is actually rising in distributed teams, because as we said, we have the best talents, we have happy employees, hopefully, and this obviously has an impact of your productivity. And again, this is something that I mentioned before, the coverage and support model, which can be increased when we have people working from different time zones. Come to the last topic, probably the most interesting one, because now you think, okay, we have all the challenges, we have seen all the opportunities, but how do I build an agile team which is remote, and how do I make sure they succeed? Here in the top, listing some of the practices that I have seen in my experience, which helped me to create remote agile teams. First of all, you need to have the right technology, obviously, otherwise you can stop right away. You need to allow for software architecture which has a modular design, because only then you will give autonomy to your teams, and you will enable them to work end to end in each of the different locations. That's very important. If you don't have this, you can stop right away. Another important thing that I have realized is that you need to pair key roles over the different locations that you have. And when I talk about key roles, I talk about front-end developers, back-end developers, requirements engineers, and testers, meaning that I usually would have one person on site, so one front-end developer on site, and then one front-end developer offshore or near shore. You would always pair them over the different locations, because this will enable you to have end-to-end flows in each of the locations, meaning you have front-end developers who can develop the user interface, you have the backend developers who implement the entire backend engine, and you have testers who come and test everything. You have all of the roles offshore, they can do it there, and you have all of the roles onshore, they can do it there. That means that you try to avoid creating bottlenecks, meaning if you would have all front-end developers, for example, in India, and then all of the back-end developers in Switzerland, then they are always dependent on each other, because remember, we are going to design and develop an end-to-end flow where we need a front end and a back end. But if these roles are distributed, you always have a bottleneck, and always someone needs to wait until the other guy is online, is ready, and stuff like this. So this is what you are trying to avoid with pairing the key roles. Then choose compatible time zones. Yeah, very important, because you need to allow for at least some hours of shared working time, because people need to talk to each other. You need to have a daily catch up, so everybody knows what has been happening over the day, what is planned for the next day. If you don't allow for this, probably it's possible, but it's definitely not a best practice. And then very, very important, you need to have infrastructure which is stable, meaning good network, good audio quality, a video conferencing tool, because this makes it so much easier. And I can tell you guys, it's very, very frustrating if you have meetings where people are not able to speak because their network is crashing all the time. It's annoying for everyone who is involved, and it just slows down all of your processes. So now we have an agile team. But now, how do we organize the agile teams? Also very important. First of all, we need to define new norms and rules for interaction, because we are no longer at the same location, meaning that we cannot just chit-chat to each other because we are sitting next to each other. Rather, we need to have tools which help us, like a project management tool, which allows for real-time editing, like Jira. We need to have virtual whiteboards like Mural, so what you just see. Video conferencing, very, very important, because all of the meetings will be virtually, so like Teams, Zoom, or Google Hangout. And then with your team, what I would always recommend, define new ground rules for virtual communication. So how you want to communicate with each other can be very small things, like you don't interrupt if somebody else is talking, or pass on the ball once you are done with your speech, stuff like this. You need to foster bonding and team building, because now we really don't have this small coffee breaks or lunches, but we still want to have a team with a high spirit. So plan for virtual lunches, have virtual coffee talks, or play games. For example, with one of my Indian teams, I scheduled 30 minutes a week where we are just playing virtual games, and it's so much fun because then you learn from your coworkers from a different perspective. Or we have virtual team events, or we introduce our pets, or we show where we live in the camera, just, to establish this psychological safety in your team, that it's not just about work, it's also about human and personal interaction. Also very important is you need to encourage coaching and knowledge sharing, because this is something that usually happens naturally when people are located. They would just sit next to each other. Hey, how is this going? What do you do here with this code? But when you are not at the same place, this is just something that you sometimes forget. So make an effort to schedule, for example, sessions where you share your knowledge between functions and also cross-site. And one thing that I find is very important, distribute your peer reviews over the location. That means have code reviews done by, for example, if we have one front-end developer in Switzerland who is developing a code, then have it reviewed by the other person who is in the other location. This creates a common sense of ownership and accountability, and also it fosters sharing code knowledge, which is important. One single source of truth, yes, very important. You need to define where you're going to document everything that you are discussing. So everything that is discussed in meetings, every requirements that you are defining need to be in one single source of truth. Very common for this is Jira or Confluence. And also, I think this goes without saying, you need to agree on a common spoken and written language, which is comfortable for everyone in the team. Another thing is about managing asynchronous collaboration. So since we are not always at the same place, we don't always communicate all the time, but rather we would also work, for example, with messaging boards or with chats. Or, as I mentioned, Confluence and Jira, which are both project management tools which allow for real-time editing, which is very important. Because if I am going to change something in the software specifications, I want the other person in the other locations to see it real-time. So immediately when I'm typing, they should see what I have changed. Otherwise, everything gets very messy and you create bottlenecks which are unnecessary. Then another important point, please use your time wisely, meaning allow for overlapping working hours so that all the teams do have at least a few hours a day where they can work together, where they can collaborate, where they can have meetings, handovers, where they can discuss issues with the code, any defects they found, etc., etc. And also important, all of the ceremonies that you're planning, so all of the meetings, make sure they are in a good timing for all of the locations involved. So please try to avoid meetings early in the morning or during lunchtime or late evening, because it's just not nice to have meetings from the beginning of the day until late in the evening, just because you want to be able to talk to all of the different people spread it over the time zones. So I recommend plan this wisely and make sure that you take the needs of everyone into consideration. And also try to schedule as few team meetings as possible, or in other words, schedule as many as needed, but don't overdo it, because you need to allow for time where everyone can work productively. And then last but not least, foster understanding of the business context. It's very important that everyone on the Agile team understands the bigger picture. What is the business context? What do we want to achieve? What is the problem that we are trying to solve here? Because sometimes this is knowledge that just gets missing. It's very clear to the business. It's very clear to the product owner, maybe also to the Scrum Master. But then some of the developers, they don't understand the big picture because maybe the product owner has not made an effort to let them understand. And especially in remote teams, I think you need to take extra effort to make sure that also your colleagues, which are not close to the business, understand what we are doing here. What is the bigger picture? Another thing which might be nice is to establish trips for the on-site team to go to the remote access or vice versa. So obviously this was a little bit difficult in the past few months, but before that we used to do that all the time, meaning that I would travel, for example, to my Indian team, or I would travel to my team in Riga just to meet them in person, have coffee with them, have dinner with them, to understand, okay, who are these persons? You build trust so much faster when you see them face to face, and you can actually connect on a more personal basis. Okay, so now we actually already reached the end of the theory part, and I want to quickly show you what we are going to do afterwards. What I'm planning to do now is that we are taking a break of 5 minutes so that you can go to the toilet, get something to drink, or just refresh. But afterwards, you are coming back and you will find yourself in breakout rooms, meaning in smaller rooms with some of your peers, where you then can work on this small exercise. Let me just give a quick overview what it is about. So the situation is the following. Imagine you are a consultant and the client has chosen you as a strategic implementation partner for developing the future digital banking solution of a Swiss bank. And you will support the bank in the areas of requirements engineering, software engineering, testing, and agile methodology. And they asked you to provide a team, an entire Scrum team. So the Scrum Master and the developer team, not the product owner, because the product owner is a client role. So the product owner is internally with the client, but you are able to staff the Scrum Master and the entire development team. You can see here, if you scroll in, we have 1 requirements engineer, 2 front-end engineers, 2 back-end engineers, and 2 testers. And now my question is, what would be your proposal to the client? How would you organize your team? Because we have a few constraints. Unfortunately, the client does not have enough budget for a 100% on-site team, meaning that some of the roles need to be staffed from offshore or nearshore. And ideally, we would achieve a ratio of 60 to 40%, meaning 60% of the people are on-site and then 40% of the people are offshore. And now I'm curious, what do you think? What would be a good proposal to the client? And you can ask yourself, why do you want to staff certain roles on-site and others offshore? Exactly. Okay, so looks like most of the people are back. Okay, yeah. Cool. I hope you enjoyed your break and you still had some time for the exercise, so though it was probably a little bit challenging with this limited amount of time. Anyhow, I'm curious and I wanted to ask you if some of the team would like to present their solution. I mean, there is absolutely no wrong or right, but maybe one team would like to show to the others what you have been discussing. Angela.
Hello.
Hello.
I just will say a little bit before I forgot.
Okay.
Okay, so we discussed a little bit about the three teams, the 3 aspects in the Scrum team. So we discussed about the product owner. So we said the product owner is in close contact with the stakeholders. So we have to define where we will place this type of role, client role. We will opt to keep the product owner in-house, headquarters, while the Scrum Master is more kind of guardian of Scrum rules. So would be there someone who needs to be there in case of there is any misunderstanding on the method or any problem that could affect the smooth running of the project. So maybe this role, this person does not necessarily needs to be in-house, but could be in other place abroad. I don't know, the second place. And then regarding the developer team, yes, this is the place where we discuss the most, because we hesitate a lot about the requirements engineer, if there's someone who could be abroad or not. And finally, we said that the requirements engineer is maybe the person with the role who needs to be closer to the product owner to keep him or her informed on the development, the running of the project. So we said that maybe we will keep the requirements engineer in-house, and distribute the other developer roles in-house and in another country or whatever. And then we have also a discussion about how familiar maybe this team was with Scrum or Agile methods. And we said also that maybe in order to be sure that everybody was aligned in terms of methodology that will be applied, we would also recommend to all of them to follow a kind of training to be sure that everybody understands about Scrum rules, practices before the project or the allocation of the team is decided.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's always very helpful to make sure that the team understands the methodology, and if not, you need to support them.
Some teams are waterfall, others not, maybe different, a variety of experiences. So that's why we thought that it would be useful to align first, no?
Absolutely, that's always a very good thing to do, to make sure that everyone is on the same train. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but very interesting solution. I mean, you're totally right. First of all, the product owner should be in-house, because that's the person who is speaking to the business. So he or she needs to be very close to the business stakeholders, which is usually in-house. When it comes to the Scrum Master, I think there it is different to say whether he or she should be on-site or offshore. Both definitely is possible. I would say keep the person close to your developers. So if your major share is on-site, then have a Scrum Master on-site. If your major share is offshore, then have it offshore. But again, there is no right or wrong. I think both of the approaches work just fine. For the developer team, absolutely agree. The requirements engineer needs to be very close to the product owner and again to the business, because this is the person who is defining all of the requirements and writing all of the technical specifications. So this person is also in constant exchange with the product owner and also the business. I have also seen setups where the business analyst is not on site. So it works. It's just more difficult, I would say, because then again, you have the same challenges as with remote teams in general. You're not able to talk face to face, no personal interaction, but it's not impossible. It just comes with extra challenges. And then for the developer team, yes, I think you had a good approach trying to have them in each location. So pair the roles, but make sure that you can deliver end-to-end in each of the locations, meaning that you don't send all of the backends to some place and all of the testers and front ends to the other place, rather distribute them. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think most of you probably had a similar approach. Did one team come up with something completely different, maybe? I think probably you're all pretty much on the same page and you probably came up with very similar solutions.
Yeah, the one thing I would also add on is that I'll have a tester in each location as well, because especially when you're doing the back end front end development offshore, it's always nice to do a smoke test there. And then also just doing the quick the sprint, just kind of the quick methodology test actually when the sprint is over. It's also kind of nice to have, and they're also close to the requirements and the Scrum Master as well.
Exactly.
It's really important.
Yeah, good point. And also some testing environments are not accessible offshore or nearshore because there is very sensitive data which is only accessible from in-house, from on-site. So then it absolutely makes sense to have also a tester in-house. All right, cool. Good, then thank you so much for this. We have 2 minutes left. Nevertheless, I would like to give you guys the chance to ask any questions. So I'm happy to stay a bit longer if you want to discuss anything. Alternatively, you can also send me an email if you have additional questions. You can find my email address on the Miro board on the top. So if you have another appointment, if you need to drop, no worries, you can reach out to me. But if you have questions and if you still have time to stay, then I'm happy to support you here. And also, in case you need to leave, at the bottom, you can actually then also leave your feedback. So here is a mood board. You can just take one of the yellow dots and place it to on the mood board, how you feel from amazing to bad. And if you want to give me some general feedback, you can add it to our Kanban board. Okay, but then I stop talking, at least for now, and I would like to give you the chance to ask questions that you might have. So then just feel free to speak up.
Can these be just general questions or only about the presentation?
Everything.
Everything. Okay. Can I pick your brain for one instance I had in the past regarding a project? So how would you, when a project is shifting from a waterfall to an agile format, how would you actually somehow get this whole format, the new format, how would you get it within the constraints of a budget? So let's say you have a 800 IT mandates to actually develop something. Now, how would you actually somehow wrap your head around that and actually bring everyone on the same page to see, okay, what or how can we achieve these goals that have been set, let's say, before most of the people join the project? How would you just create that framework?
Well, first of all, I need to understand the setup. I mean, is this an in-house build application, or are we talking with vendors that we are taking into our Agile teams as well? Because then it makes everything, again, very different.
It's a complete in-house build. It's an intranet that was meant for about 25,000 users.
Okay. I mean, so what you are trying to avoid with an agile setup is that you are planning everything up front. So you are not going to plan the end solution or the target solution, which also means then that you are not going to find all of the requirements at the very beginning. Rather, you try to have a smaller roadmap, let's say a roadmap of about 3 months, where you're going to define, okay, what am I going to build within the next 3 months? But we recommend not to go further in this process. And then I think when it comes to budgeting, very difficult to say. I think it's also handled very differently in different organizations. But usually you would be able to commit to features and epics which are on a roadmap up to 3 months. But everything past that is difficult. So I wouldn't put too much thoughts around the budget after these 3 months.
Hi, I have one question. So you put a lot of focus on this pairing of roles on-site and abroad. And my question is, what is easier to have, like the whole team distributed or to have some core team on-site? I mean, now what I experienced during the home office periods that we had in the last year, it was almost easier when everybody was at home. And then when like half of the people were in the office and the other half was at home, it got much more difficult because the people at home were kind of missing out, because those that were on site, they discussed much more together. I mean, just naturally. And it was also strange to have meetings where like 3 people sit in the same room and the others off-site. So what are like the pros and cons of having this core team, which obviously also has some advantages, to having everybody in different locations?
I think you mentioned it already yourself. One point that I see is difficult is that people are missing out. Exactly. For example, in my team at the moment is we are half of the team is in Zurich, and we are allowed to go back to the office. So we meet from time to time in the office. Again, we have chit chats, we have coffees, we have quick conversation. If something is not working, I'm just shouting to my coworker who is sitting next to me, hey, what's happening? What's wrong? Can you help me? Which is great, which fosters this personal interaction. But then the other team, or the rest of the team, is in Pune, India. And there the situation with the pandemic is still very, very different. So they are not allowed to go back to the office. They are still working from remote. So sometimes I do feel that they have the fear of missing out a little bit. But then, I mean, it's just a situation that we have to accept. I don't think it would be wise to prohibit your on-site team not to go to the office if there is the possibility for them. So it's difficult to say. Again, when we started with our project, all of the team members were remote, and I think all of us had the same situation. We just couldn't change it. But now that the Swiss team is able to go back, it also helps us to improve the way that we work and the quality that we share. And I hope that it has also positive impact on the Indian team, even though they're not allowed to go back yet, which we hope that they can do very, very soon. But I think it would be a bad approach to prohibit co-location if it's possible, just because you want to create the same possibilities for the entire team.
Julia, this Scrum method is very clear how it applies in IT projects. But how do you translate this in non-IT projects? For example, in my case, I have some IT projects, but I have also some non-IT projects, such as, for example, to deliver completely a training program. And we have people developing part of the training in different countries, different experts, and we are all online due to COVID reasons. So how do you translate, agile methodologies in this kind of projects?
I think you can take the very basics of Scrum. For example, having a Kanban board. You can have this with tasks also when they are not IT related. So for example, when you are saying that you are developing a new training program, for example, this could be a task about writing the agenda of the training or writing some of the content. And then you can use a Kanban board in a very similar way as we do in IT projects. You break down the big piece, the big chunk of work into smaller work packages, and you visualize them on your Kanban board. So where do you stand? Is it already something that is in progress? Is somebody working on it? Is it in review, or is it done? And then other elements that you can use from Scrum is, for example, the daily stand-up, where you just come together for 15 minutes, talk about what you have been doing yesterday and what you're planning to do tomorrow, and if you have any risk or impediments, and if you need the help of someone else from the team. And I also can imagine that you could easily use something like a sprint planning, where you come together, for example, bi-weekly or after 4 weeks to discuss with the team, okay, what are the next milestones? What do we want to achieve within 2 or 4 weeks? So many elements from Scrum or also from other frameworks like Kanban, you can use also in non-IT projects. Just, use your imagination and take the pieces and pieces that are good for your project.
Thank you.
And is it okay we go for one more question, Julia?
Yeah,
one last question from Paras. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's actually not a question, it's more of a addendum to what Sarah and Angela just said. In terms of having teams in different locations and teams together, I think if we look at it from a positive aspect, things go from a build to a run. So the building team is always the core team where people are actually building the whole infrastructure, but it's going to be translated or transferred over to the run team, which are the developers in the remote locations. So I think it's something for them to look forward to, that they're always connected to the program, to the project, to the organization. So I think that's a kind of a nice, maybe it's a little bit psychological uplift for them as well, but also it brings them as part of the team, and not just a part of a team for a part of a time, but as part of the long-term vision of the team. So that was just my 2 cents on that. And regarding with the how to use agile methodology in terms of actually just in a non-IT perspective. For me, from my experiences, what it's done for me is, like Julia just said, it helps you break down complex situations into smaller pieces so they're more digestible. You can bring it back together at the end, but also the collaboration has always increased. The communication structures were just from shabby to just fantastic to strong. And you always give a focus on the business value, which means that your quality will always be at a certain level, which is the standards that you want, which are always a high standard. So I think that's kind of the qualitative aspects I can take away from Agile into non-IT projects. So I think if you use that kind of approach in that aspect, you can bring everyone on board into this, people who are not technically savvy and people who are only commercially centric, and bring those two groups together.
Yeah. And one important aspect is you make the work that you're doing transparent and visible to everyone, which is sometimes very, very difficult in non-IT projects, I think.